Today, we're going to talk about 16 kinds of grief, which I've been studying and going over for a while. So, some people say grief is grief. Why bother to talk about the different types of grief? But I find that it is helpful to identify what I'm going through and what I'm feeling and the reasons for it. So, I want to share with you. But first of all, we're going to say, what is grief? A simple definition is that grief is a normal, natural response to any unwanted change. It can be not getting what you want, or in the case of this young mother whose baby has died, it's getting what you don't want. So we're going to go through these types of grief in alphabetical order. First, acute grief. Acute grief is an immediate, intense, painful response to a loss, and it tends to dominate the griever's life for a relatively short period of time. That's not always true, but it's that sharp, strong initial grief reaction. And it may eventually dissipate or pass, but if it's not tended to, this acute grief can lead to chronic grief. Then we have ambiguous grief. So there are two kinds of ambiguous grief. In this picture, you see there's a person who is here physically, but not able to communicate or interact very well mentally or emotionally. So it might be someone that you've known for a long time and their body is alive, they're present, but the relationship is different. And the connection that you have with the person is missing and you feel sad. So some examples are dementia, mental illness, addiction, alcoholism, brain damage, coma, trauma response, or a catatonic state. And then another kind of ambiguous grief is kind of the opposite. So the person is in your mind and heart, but they're physically absent. And you may not know where they are or if they're alive, dead or alive, really. So examples would be if someone is lost or abducted or has run away, or natural events like a flood or drowning, landslide, avalanche, tsunami, fire, volcano, maybe trapped in a coal mine or lost at sea. These are the other flip side of ambiguous grief. And then we have ancestral grief. So ancestral grief is passed down from generation to generation. And in many families, difficult stories are not shared because they're too painful. And family secrets often just remain hidden. And we tend to absorb them from our parents and our grandparents and even our great grandparents and ancestors without ever knowing what the story was or what happened. So, for example, you might know that there's some history of violence in your grandparents' generation, but no one is willing to tell you actually what happened. And you may kind of hesitate to ask because it's a taboo subject, but if you do ask, you might just be ignored. This is a photo of my daughter, Naomi, who died when she was 38 in 2015. This is anticipatory grief, which I experienced for a good period of time during her life. Anticipatory grief occurs before an impending death or separation. And it might be that the person has an illness or behavior problems or addiction, substance misuse. So the griever has these fearful thoughts and feelings, which even can be like a panic attack. And it is normal, but the nerves are very sensitive and the person could be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and even given medication for their condition when really what they're going through is grief. And then we have bewildered grief. In bewildered grief, the whole situation is just baffling and confusing. Maybe you've been abandoned or traumatized and you don't know why. Maybe you're curious about a situation, but at the same time, you don't want to know what happened or why it happened. So an example might be a family member is murdered and you just don't know the circumstances around it, and you're curious, but you sort of don't want to know. You're just bewildered. So chronic grief, this photo kind of shows one result that can happen with chronic grief. It's like a dark cloud that doesn't lighten up over time. And it can be a way to hold on to the memory of a person that you've lost. And if you build your whole life around this one person and then they're gone and you don't have any other relationships, it tends to be more difficult and challenging. So an example would be after a long marriage and giving care to your partner, they die. And even though you knew they were going to die, you're still just not able to cope. You just weren't prepared for it, emotional. Then we have collective grief. This is the memorial at the September 11th site of the Twin Towers in New York City. So collective grief is when there's a massive tragic event that is widely publicized and people all over the world feel the grief. But we just don't know what to do about it or how to help those who are suffering the loss. But we are all grieving the loss together. So yes, this example of the attack on the Twin Towers in 2001, or back in 1945, there was the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan with the nuclear bomb. These are examples of collective grief. So then we have complicated grief. So in complicated grief, there are a variety of aspects which make it confusing and difficult to deal with. So it can involve estrangement, broken family connections, difficult relationships, a compounding of grief, different situations, and a lot of heartache. And it can be so baffling. Sometimes you just feel hopeless or worthless. And you feel like you might be angry and want to blame someone, but you just don't know where to turn. So in a case, for example, where there was a step parent who was violent and abusive to you or your parent, and you felt powerless, and now if they have died, you may have a lot of confusion and complication around their death, a lot of mixed feelings. Compounded grief. Compounded grief is where you've sustained one major loss after another over a period of time, and you just feel like you've been knocked down, and you don't know how to keep going. So it has a sense of being overwhelmed or numb and angry and sad, and just it's difficult to cope with because there's just so much there. So there are various examples we could give, but this picture kind of tells us something about it. Then we have delayed grief. In delayed grief, we wait until later to feel our emotions. So we get busy taking care of the funeral and all the legal and financial business and getting rid of the person's stuff or dealing with it. We have family and friends, work, lack of support, too many people hovering over us, avoiding our feelings. There are many reasons why we just delay our grief. Sometimes it's just simply avoidance because it's just too hard. So an example might be if there's a parent with young children and they just have so much to take care of every day, and they just try to take care of the kids and keep going, but it delays the actual process of grieving. And then we have disenfranchised grief. So this involves being cut out of a chain of important connections. So it can happen if you're bullied in school and you're cut out of a group, or you're abandoned, the family is divided, the chain is broken. It's any kind of situation in which someone is being left out of an important circle. And a lot of times in these situations, there's gossip and shame and blame, and or online ghosting happens, and it's very bewildering and confusing. If you don't know why they're cutting you off, it can be really painful. I want to share this photo because disenfranchised grief does occur in families where there's a lack of acceptance of people of different orientations or different frameworks. And it's a very sad thing because this joyful young rainbow family um, is an example of a family who could be distanced from their family of origin just because of misunderstanding and closed thinking or prejudice. So that's one area in which the chain of family connections is broken, and it's quite unnecessary and kind of really sad. But they're having a lot of fun, aren't they? Environmental grief. Environmental grief is both personal and collective. We're experiencing climate change and the resulting loss of all these beautiful treasured landscapes and species. There are geological events of destruction and devastation that happen. They take a toll on our lives and our resources and the beauty of our world. And we tend to feel angry and powerless when policymakers are making destructive choices with regards to the earth. So examples would be global warming, melting icebergs, abuse of farmlands, toxic chemicals, volcanoes, the resulting earth-shattering events that happen as a result of the earth not being taken care of well. And maladaptive grief. Maladaptive grief is really dysfunctional and it can be very dangerous. So this is a kind of grief in which the person is getting really obsessive and compulsive and clinging, stalking, threatening violence, and perhaps having violent behavior, harmful stuff. So in a maladaptive situation, the griever can be so focused on their own rage, their own outrage, that they're not being rational. And oftentimes behind our anger and our rage is a terribly deep sorrow that we have not been able to get help with. So, an example would be a kid who was bullied in school and mistreated, who goes out to shoot up a group of people. And then we have traumatic grief. Traumatic grief involves like sudden, unexpected, violent, shocking, unjust situations. The griever is jolted by the tragic nature of the event, and it can cause a wide range of responses, including disbelief, rage, terror, numbness, even disassociation. So traumatic grief is often a collective experience in the same way collective grief is, but it's got that violent trauma that it leaves in its wake. And unresolved grief. In unresolved grief, there are so many important questions that just don't have answers. So it's really difficult. We feel all kinds of emotions, and we wonder who the people were involved in the situation and what did they do and why did it happen. And it's maybe a whole web of interactions and players that you just can never know the answers. But it's really easy in grief, it's easy to obsess and you can't stop thinking about the situation because you're trying to figure it out. So then we have vicarious grief. Vicarious grief is when someone you care about has suffered a deep and significant loss. So, you're not personally involved with them or with the person who has died, but you really feel that sympathy, that empathy and compassion for the person who's in grief, but you don't know what to do or how to approach it or how to help them. So it's common, in the world, and it's especially difficult for first responders, healthcare system workers, funeral directors, and people who deal with death. But it's not their direct circle of people. It's people that they encounter and they do care about. So that's vicarious grief. And I just wanted to share, I love this photo because it's from Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery in Gainesville, Florida. And it's helpful if we can go through our days with death awareness. Death will happen and we don't know when. So for me, that makes me just want to live every day as well as I can. And I realize that the only really gift that I can take with me at my deathbed is whatever good deeds I've been able to do in my life. However, I've been able to help people, even in small ways. So it's good to keep in mind that we will die one day. This is a photo of a body being placed into the ground in Prairie Creek Cemetery. My name is Shanti Vani. I'm a transforming grief specialist and also an end-of-life doula and a member of the Florida End-of-Life Doula Alliance. My website is shantivani.com. Our organization is feolda.org, Feolda. And my email is goodgriefwoman@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I want to thank everyone for listening.